Start. Hello students, I am Damini and today we are going to begin with industries, a very general introduction to industries, and we are doing this on behalf of personal tutors. We begin today understanding what exactly industries are and how they are classified. The classification used for the naming given to the various different types of industries. And then once we are done with this, we'll deal separately with two parts, that is agro-based industries and mineral-based industries. These two industries. So we begin with the introduction. What exactly is industry? You all are familiar with the general term industry. You know that industry is a place where there is organized human effort. They have organized the workplace in such a manner that they produce something useful. So it is an organized human effort to produce something useful. But then this organization can be on a large scale, can be on a smaller scale. It may use the material it requires from agriculture, or it may use the material it requires from minerals. There are various ways that this industry can work. It can work with lots of people, it can work with less number of people within the village organizing themselves to produce something important. When we speak about industries, so when we are speaking about industries, we are saying it can be on a large scale, it can be on a smaller scale. We can saying that they can use animal product or they can use agricultural product. So there are various factors which decide what kind of industry it is and where it is located. So we look into the factors which decide the location of the industry. What are the factors which decide where an industry will be located? These factors can be divided into two parts. There can be geographical factors, there can be non-geographical factors. Say to start an industry, you need the capital, the money to bring about the raw material. You need a particular place where you have to set up the machines. So you need the capital. That is one thing that you need. Other than this, you also need to look into it that wherever you are setting up an industry, does it get the raw material, that is the material which will be used in the industry should be easily available within a certain limits, within a certain kilometers. Or it should not be a material which does not sustain for a long duration of time. Say for example sugarcane, it perishes after a certain time. The juice content reduces after a certain number of days. So if you are locating in sugarcane industry, you have to see to it that this industry is within a range where the sugarcane can be supplied within 24 hours. So there are certain geographical factors which decide where the industry will be located. Now, when we speak about geographical factors, the first one that we look into is the raw material. The raw material basically means whatever is required in the industry to be processed. From whatever material the final product will be made is called as the raw material. So there are factors which determine how the industries will be based upon raw material. We say if the material is bulky or if it is heavy, the industry will be located near the source of raw material. Say for example, we are saying that this Chota Nagpur region is rich in minerals, and if we want to set up an industry which requires these minerals, then the industry will be located within this region. Or we are trying to say, suppose a person is trying to set up iron and steel industry. So for setting up iron and steel industry, he needs iron ore as the raw material. He may need certain other things as raw material. He may need manganese as the raw material. there is a need for power supply for the nearby the industry. So this raw material has to be within a certain limits, within some 200 kilometers or within certain limits, the person should be able to obtain the raw material. Only then, because it's a heavy and bulky thing, transporting it would cost a lot, would make it an expensive job. Transporting from one place to another would not be easily possible. So that is why these industries are located close to the source of raw material. Or we have given another example, say sugarcane, sugar industry. Now if the industry is located far away from where the sugar is available, from wherever the sugar cane is available, then in that case, if it is far away, by the time the sugarcane reaches the factory, the sucrose content decreases, and therefore it will not be conducive for the entrepreneur or for the industrialist to set up an industry over there. So it should be within a range where within 24 hours the sugarcane can be easily available. Raw material is one. The raw material should not, if it is heavy and bulky, the industry is located near the source of raw material. You have to remember this. Wherever is the raw material, the industry is located near the source of raw material. Or if the raw material is perishable, in that case also the industry is located near the source of raw material, wherever the raw material is easily available. Then other than this, there is the second factor is water supply. Now there are many industries which need a lot of water supply, like textiles industries, maybe for washing, maybe for dyeing. There are various purposes for which the raw material is required. So such industries are located close to the source of water supply. Or iron and steel industry. Now if iron and steel industry is located over here close to the raw material, they also see to it that there is some availability of fresh water over here. Only then the industry will be set up over here, because the water may be required for cooling, the water may be required for other purposes, and that is how it has to be the clean fresh water has to be available wherever the industry is located. Third is energy. Now industries like aluminium, industries like iron and steel, such industries require high amount of power. They require high amount of power to melt the ore. When I'm saying ore, the stone from which iron ore is obtained, the basic material which the basic stone which contains 70 to 80% of iron. It has to be purified. This ore has to be first converted into iron. It has to be melted. What are the impurities that has to be removed? So melting this piece requires a lot of energy, power supply. A lot of power supply is required. So they have to be located close to the power supply, because transmission of power supply would also cost them high amount of money, and it may not become conducive to run the industry in the long run. Then transport is another factor which determines where the industries will be located. Like we have given you an example of sugarcane. If the transport is not good, then the raw material will not reach the industry at the right time, and because of that the raw material does not reach the industry at the right time, then it is not worthwhile crushing the sugarcane and taking out the juice content from it. Many a times the industries are located near the port towns, because it is easy to transport the finished products from here, the basic material from here to other countries with the whenever it has to be exported. It's easy to send the product from this place, and that is how transport plays a very important role in setting up of the industries. Labor is another important factor which decides where the industry will be located. Now this requires two different types of labor. It can be the skilled labor and the unskilled labor. When we are saying the skilled labor, like for iron and steel industries, we may be requiring certain engineers to work there. It requires people efficient in certain field. It requires people to be fluent in, and they must be familiar with their type of work that they are going to do. But then certain people can be trained to do certain amount of work. We are calling them as unskilled labor, where they can be trained to run a machine, where they can be trained to, collect certain materials and put it into the machinery. So this kind of thing, people who are not really actually familiar with what work has to be done but are trained within the unit of what work has to be done, are called as unskilled labor. This is available in plenty, but this we need certain people who may be settled in a particular area, because if the industry is large enough to take up the cost of setting up houses for them. Then we have other two factors, like we have climate is an important factor, especially for software industries, where people need cooler climates. Temperatures should not be very high. Initially, especially during the 1990s, when the software industry was being set up, during that time, climate played a very important role, because computers cannot be exposed to high temperature. Or it is like cotton textile industry. Cotton textile. The climate plays an important role. The cotton thread needs a climate which is high in humidity. The humidity should be high, and only then the thread will not break easily. If the humidity is high, the thread that is being made will not break easily, and that is how climate plays an important role where this industry will be set up. They say that it's set up in somewhere near Bombay and Ahmedabad, because their climate has high humidity into them. Especially Bombay has high humidity, and cotton textile can be easily set up over there. Market also plays an important role, because the finished product has to be sent from one place to another. If it is market is easily available within a certain limits, then it is easy for the industrialist to sell off the product and then again make new products. Non-geographical factors include, we have said, capital. The capital and entrepreneur, person who can set up the industry, or we need the amount of money required to run the industry may be high. So capital is an important part. Government policies are also another one which play an important role in where the factories will be located. What kind of policies do they follow? What norms do they have for pollution clearing? What norms do they have for setting up the industry? These also determine the location of the industries. Now we look into the classification of industries. When we speak about classification of industries, there are various ways the classification is being done. It can be done on the basis of raw material, it can be done on the basis of ownership, or it can be done on the basis of size or finished product. Now, when we are speaking about raw material, we are speaking that the industry is classified on the basis of raw material, we are saying from where the raw material is coming to the industry. Is it coming from agriculture? Then we are calling it as agro-based. The source of raw material. Here, what is the source of raw material? An industry can be mineral-based. Okay, it can be a mineral-based industry when the raw material is from minerals. So what is this? If agriculture, sugarcane industry, so the raw material is from agriculture, so we are saying agro-based. Iron and steel industry basically requires iron ore, manganese, limestone. So this is a mineral-based industries. Those which are dependent on dairy product industries, like those which are dependent on the milk of the cow, then they are called as animal-based. So animal-based. Then those which are dependent upon forest resources are called as forest-based industries. The next category is the size of the industry. When we are speaking about size, we are trying to say whether a large number of people are employed into it, a lot of money is required for setting up the industry, then a lot of skilled and unskilled labor is there. So depending upon these factors, if the industry requires very high capital, skilled as well as unskilled labor, large quantity of raw materials, then we are saying that it's a large scale industry. Like we have iron and steel industry, where lots of people are employed, a large piece of land is required, large capital is required to purchase that piece of land. Raw material has to be brought from nearby area, and a lot of raw material is required. So we call it as large scale industry. Medium scale is one where, as compared to the large scale, the amount of money required to run that industry is not very high. Like we have cycle manufacturing. So they will have just the basic iron, which is steel, which has been produced, and from that it's not like the melting of the iron, a blast furnace is required where the iron is melted. It's not like that. They have taken that raw material from the iron and steel industry and have further tried to modify it and manufacture the cycle. So it's a medium scale. Small scale, where the capital required is comparatively very less. The number of people may not be very high. It may be just 5 or 6 people who can run a rice mill or a flour mill, or maybe even bakery. That is called as small. The number of people required is comparatively very, very less. It may be just 3 or 4 people, but here the number of people required may be around 50 to 100. The medium scale. Then we have based upon the ownership. The next category is based upon the ownership. Who owns the industry? Whether it is the government, who owns the industry, or it is an individual and a group of individuals who own the industry, or it is both of these who own the industry, or is it that a group of people have pooled up their resources and are running the industry by bringing the raw material from wherever they produce it and are trying to run the industry. So it is on this basis that this industry, if the ownership is by government, then we call it as public sector. Like we have BHEL is an example, where the government owns, the people are employed over there. The government owns the industry, brings in and invests the money in bringing in the raw material, purchase of the land. It is all this belongs to the government. But we have an individual or a group of individuals own the industry. So then in that case it is private sector. Or when it is the government as well as the people, individuals, say 50% of the money is by the government and 50% of the money is by private individuals, then we are calling it as joint sector. But then certain times sugar industries, say in southern India, are the ones where the sugar planters, they have tried to look into the region where they want to set up the industry. They have pooled in their resources and they try to manage that whole area by sugar industry, by bringing in the raw material that they have produced. Even producing the raw materials, they have followed certain norms. They have seen to it that the kind of sugarcane that is required in the industry is of good quality. So because they are the manufacturers, they are the producers, they see to it that the quality is maintained, and then they run that industry. It is by a group of people who are managing the industry by bringing in the raw material, by bringing in the machinery. They have planned it in such a manner that they can run the industry in an efficient manner. So the third one is the cooperative. Fourth one is cooperative. So the last after this is the finished product. When we speak about the finished product, we have basic industries, those industries which provide the raw material to other industries. Like we have iron and steel industry. Iron and steel industry is one which the basic steel is being manufactured by them. This steel is utilized by other industries to produce other things. So the raw material has to be converted into some other product. That is a secondary industry. The basic industry just manufactures the raw material. Say I am saying iron and steel, it melts the iron ore and produces the iron. It produces the steel, which is utilized by other industries to produce the final primary product. Now these two industries are helped by banks, transport, etc. They are helped by banks, they are helped by the transport. So this all is included. They cannot manage without them. I mean, they're dependent on them for the deposition of money, for transfer of raw materials. That is called as tertiary. And then we have the ancillary, where certain parts which are being required, say nuts and bolts. The iron and steel industry manufactures the steel from which the cycle is being manufactured. This cycle requires nuts and bolts which are available within that region by the ancillary industries. Certain industries which are producing nuts and bolts are located where this is located, and they provide them with these spare parts. So these are the ancillary industries. Now, other than this major classification that we have based upon size, based upon raw material, ownership and finished product, there is also another way of classifying it, that is on the basis of location and market. On the basis of location and market, we have the village industries and the cottage industries. Village industries, like they provide the basic needs of the local market. Say pottery. Pottery is the basic need of the local market. So these people, they make the products which are required by the local market. Cottage industries is a group of family members who may be employed in, like handlooms. Certain products which they make which can be sold, but they may be located in the village itself. Only one family member is employed, one group of family members is employed, and they make products which may be utilized by the villages, or maybe even sent outside the village. So like we have handloom industries. Other than this, we also have one more categorization of industries, where we say the finished product is light. So we say light industry. Finished product is heavy, and we say heavy industry. So that is another. Light and heavy is another classification that has been given over here. along with these four basic classifications that we have done. We will further look into two different categories of industries here, that is the agro-based industries, which will include cotton, textile, and we'll also look at silk industry into it, and we'll look into the mineral based industries, where we'll be speaking about iron and steel industries, or it may be like the information technology, or it may be further certain of the mineral based industries. Basically what you are asked from this whole unit, I mean agro-based and mineral-based, this was just an introduction where you may be asked the difference between large scale and the small scale. What is the difference between them? Or you may be asked an example for each of them. Give an example for large scale, give an example for small scale. Or they may be asking you what is name an agro-based industry, or they may give you a name of an industry and ask you classify what kind of industry it is. That is how we'll look into the classification of the industries. सब बंद कर दीजिए उसको.